Hello there. They call me Mr. E. Now, collectivism is a scary concept. When people hear the word collectivism, they immediately think dictatorship, food rations, suppression of individuality, conformity, etc. But beyond all the scare, what is collectivism? The word collective isn't that bad. Maybe we can step back from our conditioning to think about this objectively. Collectivism has got to do with holding something as part of a collective, a group, a community, a society. It's a collectively held interest in something. Collectivism does not mean being part of a group, like enrollment in a club or a cult. Collectivism is about sharing something, an ideal or a physical good, and caring for it. Oh, so warm and fuzzy. But honestly, that's what it's about. Not signing your life away to a supreme leader. So where does the concept come from? And what does it really mean?
My name is Mystery. For reasons unknown, I have been thrown back into the past almost 100 years. And this is my story.
Collectivism, for me, goes back to the Magna Carta. You've probably heard the name before. This was an important document for the establishment of basic human rights and laws created in 1215 in England. It was revolutionary, but it wasn't alone. It came with a corresponding document called the Charter of the Forest. Now, this document is just as important as the Magna Carta, but never talked about. It set out the rules for the use, protection, and preservation of common resources to be enjoyed by all humans, king or commoner. It had laws allowing access to the forests, water bodies, and fields of the kingdom. Now, it's crucial because it established the idea that there was land and resources on the planet that should be accessed by all freely, and that these natural resources should be cherished, protected, and preserved for future generations. Now, this ain't some hippie utopia here. This happened in medieval England, in the Dark Ages, when they thought the earth was flat and was the center of the universe. The point I am trying to make here is that owning and sharing in something collectively was recognized as a basic premise for the enjoyment and continuation of human life. Now let's fast forward a little bit to the Enlightenment. As liberal societies broke away from the rule of kings, they looked to produce civilizations that ensured freedom and equality for all men. That's right, ladies, all men, and more precisely, property-owning ones. And so, one of the cornerstones of this liberal society was private property. People having the rights to own something to the exclusion of all others, which is protected by the state, unable to be arbitrarily taken away by another person, especially some king or tyrant. Collectivism, it's important that this is understood here, is a counter-ideology to the institution of private property being held as this leading principle of free society. When people think free countries today, they think of the ones where you can own private property. Collectivists, on the contrary, argue that private property is inherently unfair, as it naturally creates advantages for those who own property over those who own less or none. It's pretty obvious, but not something that is really thought about today. And so, collectivists hold that private property should not exist, and that property should be held in common or collectively. For example, all factories should be owned collectively by society or by the workers who work there. All natural resources, all transportation, all infrastructure should be owned collectively by society or a community so that it can be controlled in the collective interest, as opposed to just being managed for private interest, which usually just means for profit. Now, it would also mean that all parks and roads would be owned publicly and, oh wait, that example doesn't work because all parks and roads are already public land. See, there are distinctions in our current world where we accept that even in a free society, that there are some common assets that are just better managed in public hands rather than in private ownership, i.e., collectivist thinking is not that foreign more scary. The idea of collectivism has unfortunately been hijacked and its reputation smeared by Western countries, coincidentally the very same cultures that used private property to conquer the world. Now let's look at how collectivism has been applied, though, shall we? As a result of World War I, combined with greedy capitalists and Wall Street bankers completely destroying the world economy, causing the Great Depression, countries in Europe started to look to organise themselves based on supposedly collectivist ideals. Remember that. Collectivism was a response to greedy capitalists and their reckless antics, not some randomly evolved cult ideal. And so, thanks to the immense propaganda campaign against fascism and communism produced by democratic nations, collectivism got a really bad rap. And it's still, to this day, made out to be this enemy of freedom and individualism. Collectivism is evil because it forces people to look the same, eat the same, work the same, live the same, etc., etc. And individualism is so great because, it allows you to express yourself and be who you want to be. And so most people think that collectivism and individual freedom are naturally opposites and they cannot exist together. However, this is a complete misconception. Collectivism, in its purest form, exists to protect individual freedom as its most important objective. Unlike a society based on private property, which actually stops people from doing things freely because people can literally own ideas and things in order to prevent others from having access to it, collectivism seeks to have property to be held in common so it can be freely accessible to all. Remember, private property allows freedoms for some, those with property, not freedom for all. Now, there are two main types of collectivist methodologies out there. One, and this is the one that people are most familiar with, where communal property is controlled by the state, like in communist regimes and in Marxist traditions, usually called state or authoritarian communists. The other type believe that common property should be owned directly by free associations, communities, and unions organized into collections of communities. They refer to themselves as anti-authoritarian communists and have a bottom-up approach to collectivism. Now again, collectivists who have tried this stuff in the past have interpreted collectivism for themselves. It has been mixed up with authoritarianism to create new societies. That doesn't define collectivism. It's their own versions of it. Now, an economist's critique of collectivism is that best encapsulated by the idea of the tragedy of the commons. Basically, when natural resources are freely accessible to all, not owned by any one, it will be abused because humans are naturally selfish and will take more for themselves, destroying the resource for all. Now, it's important to remember this is a theory, not a law of physics. People don't just exploit resources uncontrollably because they can or because they are greedy psychos. That's what private companies do. Ooh, that was savage. But that is the big nail in the coffin for economists when it comes to collectivism. People can't be trusted, so you can't have common goods. Now, this thought process is so manipulative that it's been used as a justification to privatize common goods all over the globe, stealing valuable resources from vulnerable people and communities. Now, replacing private property with common property is a completely revolutionary act and would change the world. No question. Do we have the audacity to try it? Now, if you thought this was interesting, share this with someone who should hear this and subscribe for more. There is much to learn before we can unlock the revolution. Remember, I am, you are, we are a mystery.